What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel and more SPQR coverage here of the new edition. So, depending on when you're watching this, this might still be before the book has been released or the new edition has been released. But if you're watching that afterwards, obviously, then everyone has access to this too. But bringing you guys some content before the book is actually out, we were fortunate enough to get an early copy. So, we've been going through and reviewing the factions, so definitely check out that series here. But there are some other important changes with this edition, some more obvious and some a little bit more subtle. So, as part of all that too, just figured we would show you guys some of the differences in equipment and other special rules and so on and so forth. So the equipment side hasn't changed all that much, but there is one significant change, and that's the fact that, again, the whole parry system is essentially gone. So that definitely changes the nature of some weapons and how useful some are, and you got to reflect that really in um, the which units have access to which weapons, the points cost for them, whether they're built in or upgrade into them. Does it make sense to buy certain extra weapons and so on and so forth? And just again, slightly tweaking how useful some weapons are. So the axe, the good old trusty axe, has stayed the same, lethal one, nothing special there. As far as new rules are concerned, again, we kind of have both books side by side, but we're going to focus on the new one for you guys here. So these are the new things. The club has also retained Smasher, and that's basically mostly still the same. Just doesn't allow the opponent to use their shield. The dagger is still short, and really, again, nothing special there. The fists are short and weak. We've seen that. The Great Axe, lethal 2, Smasher, and two-handed, also basically the same. Large club, lethal 1, Smasher, and two-handed there. The long spear is still long, surprisingly, and the pike is also very long. The short spear, however, whereas before it didn't have any rule next to it, now has reach, and we'll explain that in just a bit to you guys. But reach is a sort of a part of the sort of hierarchy of the length of weapons now, if that makes sense for you guys. So basically, there's reach, long, and very long as far as order of importance and which one is more important. So very long will outrange anything as far as or outreach anything, I should say. Long is better than reach, and reach is better than nothing. Okay, so if that makes sense for you guys. And it's basically the same rule. So you basically have a bonus against somebody who doesn't have your equivalent level of that, um, or worse, right? So, like, if you have reach and they don't have anything, then you're gonna impose a penalty on them for melee, and that has changed a little bit too. Before, I believe it was basically you had a bonus versus the people who didn't have that, but now it's imposing a penalty on the person who does not have that. So we'll check that for you guys in just a bit again, just to kind of confirm. But anyway, so again, reach versus nothing. You have the advantage there. Basically, just making short spears much more useful now than they were before. And then if you reach versus reach, of course, is going to be a wash. Long versus reach still has the advantage. And then very long versus basically everything else that isn't very long has the advantage there. The sword has lost the parry mechanic, so there's no specific benefit just as far as the weapon itself having special rules, but certain talents, of course, will still take advantage of the sword. So it's lost a little bit and kind of gains a little bit too with the way that some of the talents have changed for you guys. So just something to consider now. So again, the whole parry mechanic is gone. We're not throwing buckets of dice anymore, or as many dice overall. And there's going to be essentially far fewer rerolls just to speed up gameplay and actually make dice rolls mean more in this new edition. And then finally, the two-handed sword has changed a little bit as well. So it has lethal parry and two-handed still, of course, but parry from the old edition has been replaced here with reach, which is actually really cool and really does change the dynamic there of the two-handed sword. And really just makes that a much more interesting option there when you're fighting against that or having that, and the opponent doesn't have that. So, for example, like the Falx with the Dacians is counting as a two-handed sword. So that really, again, changes up the dynamic of how certain units are useful and so on and so forth. So that's basically the weapons in a nutshell, guys. Again, the close combat weapons, we'll still touch upon the ranged weapons here in just a moment. But let us really briefly come back, and then we will explain reach for you guys. Alrighty, guys, we're back, and we'll cover this in a separate video as well on the special rules that are out there, the more advanced rules. But figured it would just make sense to show it here real quick because it's really mainly involving melee weapons. So weapons with reach, such as short spears, allow the wielder or their wielder to keep attackers at bay, making it much harder for them to strike back. So a unit using a reach weapon imposes a -1 penalty to the melee checks of opponent units who do not also use reach, long, or very long weapons. A reach weapon may not be used in dual weapon fighting, we should say. That makes sense. So yeah, again, really cool here, right? Changes the dynamic of those things that have reach, specifically the short spear and the two-handed sword. Now, kind of interesting. Would have been nice maybe if the two-handed axe would have had that too, just because you certainly could swing that thing in a pretty broad arc. But that's it's already pretty nasty on its own, so probably would be maybe a little bit too good if it also had reach as well, and it is a little bit unwieldy in that sense. So it probably would be a little bit too strong with this extra buff here. But again, a -1 penalty to the melee checks of opponents who don't also use reach, long, or very long weapons, guys. So again, really changing up the dynamics there, making short spears just because they're going to be a little bit more prevalent across most factions than the two-handed swords. But so I feel like they get the biggest and most important buff there. So really short spears before was kind of like the best use to get the best use out of them. You really had to put them on like cavalry or something to get good charges off and get like lethal and stuff. But here now they just have a much greater use and really does transform some of the units that are more like skirmisher type, but didn't necessarily have long spears or anything. And by and large, short spears are pretty cheap to come by for most factions, most units. So in that sense, again, just really changes the usefulness of a lot of units out there, and certainly should be a factor now to consider when you're purchasing units that have it, or taking a unit and then upgrading the unit with that as well. So something to keep in mind, guys. And we'll be right back, and we will take a look at the ranged weapons. Alrighty, guys, and very briefly here, so the ranged weapons essentially have not changed and as far as ranges and special rules are concerned. So again, the bow, the good old ubiquitous bow, is still 20 inches, but that no special rules there, but does give you generally that ability to move and shoot, or shoot twice in turn. Very good stuff there. So quantity versus quality there. The javelins, again, your sort of short range kill shot there, essentially. Lethal to one shot, obviously, because you're throwing it, but most units have access to have like multiple javelins. But so assuming you hit, you're generally going to push some damage through. Lethal 2 is pretty nice, again, -2 to enemies armor, but again, certainly if the dice are not in your favor, then that's not only wasting your shot, because you're not going to get that one back, your ammunition back, and there's a finite amount of javelins that units carry, so something to keep in mind. But still, when the dice really hit home on those, especially against lightly armored targets, they can definitely do a lot of damage. Or even, with favorable rolls and poor armor rolls on the opponent's side, can certainly start to plink away at the numbers of some of the more tankier units in the game. The sling is, again, kind of your outside of like war machines like the Scorpion, which really is just for 3 factions. The sling really is your long range missile threat here, but again, slow, which really is just going to be one shot a turn. But if you take a sizable unit and or multiple smaller units, and just park them in a good spot where they have some sort of protection, a good vantage point, maybe even objectives depending on the scenario. Lethal 1 is really great, and just the fact that you can plink away from such a long range, so really nice to pick off vulnerable things with that. Lethal 1 will still put some hurt on units, and certainly random heroes kind of going solo are great targets for sort of massed sling units there that can through quantity, not necessarily always just the lethal one, but quantity, start plinking off wounds on heroes and really forcing them to maybe join a unit or take cover. And then finally, stones, nothing special to say about them. Just the same old 10-inch range as before. So that kind of wraps up the equipment, guys, as far as weapons are concerned. Let us know your thoughts in the comments there. What do you feel about the changes to them? Again, reach being the main change in the removal of parry. So again, swords aren't necessarily useless by any means. Still kind of like a standard close combat weapon, but really to get the most out of swords now, as far as any special rules are really going to be in the hands of heroes, as far as getting extra abilities out of that to really do more damage to the enemy. So, but that being said, so many units have swords, so it's still a good weapon, especially paired with good armor and shields. It's just we're not dealing with parry anymore. So, again, let us know your thoughts, guys. Happy to hear from you, what you think overall. Hit us up with a like and a subscribe as well if you could. That helps the channel grow and keep growing. And then if you do want to support the channel a little bit more, we do have a link in the description there. If you head over to Warlord and pick up anything there from that link, that helps support the channel as well. So we really do appreciate everybody who's been doing that. In the meantime, guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Take care, and we will see you in the next one.